Hi, and thank you for tuning into this podcast. My name is Sherri Douglas, and in this series, we explore community connection, optimal human potential, and transformational collective growth through inspiring conversations with a diverse range of people who are working towards a positive change in the world. I hope you enjoy this episode today, and if you would please take the time to like, share, and subscribe, we would greatly appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sherri Douglas, and today I'm sitting with Dennis O'Connor from Awakening in Health. We've been sitting down having a wonderful chat recently about all of this talk about germs and the micro organisms and the bacteria and everything that's going on that we cannot see. We cannot see these things, right? We're told about them in science and in biology class. However, something that I don't have a tremendous amount of knowledge, but and noticing that in the world there is all of this information out there. And today, Dennis and I are going to open up the discussion around germ theory and terrain theory, a couple of different perspectives on these concepts. But welcome back, Dennis. Good to have you.
Good to be here, as usual.
As usual, we do this every Thursday usually, but today is Friday. And the main reason for this discussion is because tonight we have a special apologies for the slight delay there. We just got here in far north Queensland, there is a potential of a cyclone brewing off the coast, so there might be some little technical issues there. But the main reason for this discussion today, where we look at germ theory versus terrain theory, is because tonight we have a huge array of doctors who have spent their life work in this field to understand these concepts at a greater level, and they're really going to unpack it even deeper on a special live broadcast on Earth Heroes TV, which I'd encourage you to go to. In the description, you'll find a link that you can find this live broadcast and tune in tonight live or watch the replay tomorrow if you don't get time. But Dennis and I today are just going to unpack it a little bit from our understanding. Dennis has a lot more knowledge and wisdom on this subject than I. I am actually learning a tremendous amount on this, and I'm curious. I just want to explore and understand new perspectives. I want to hear all sides of the stories here. And so that's the main purpose of our discussion today. And I want to invite you, if you like this video, please like it. And if you don't like it, no problem. Just leave us a comment and ask us why, or just explain what was for you that didn't resonate or what did resonate. And if you did find value in it, please, if you could share it, that would go a long way for us. We really appreciate you getting this, this perspective out there, because it's an interesting one in the times that we're in, with a lot of information available and people busy doing their normal day-to-day life. And where do we look to? Who do we trust? What information do we take on as the truth? These are all really valuable questions to ask, and today I'm going to ask a lot of questions of Dennis, who's a man who's worked in that field. Maybe you just want to give us a quick, again, you've in past episodes spoke to your experience in this field, but just for the viewers in today's video, for this purpose, just explain briefly what your life experience is.
Sure. So my I guess main profession is in nursing, and I kind of worked my way up. I did about 10 to 12 years in intensive care, very high level there. I got to the level of what's called a clinical nurse consultant. During that job, I had to do things like training doctors and training other nurses and putting policies and procedures and practices together. So I like to think that I've got a fairly good idea of a lot of things relating to health. Then I branched off, did a few other things outside of health, including scuba dive instructing and a few things like that. Got back into the area of addiction, and then I went very heavily into the area of mental health, the acute mental health. So I kind of consider myself a jack of all trades, almost a master of none. And as opposed to ever kind of, I guess, declaring myself an expert, I like to think that I'm in a really fantastic position to be able to critique information from experts and work out where I see the majority of truth. And the more I kind of dig in some domains, the kind of more amazing my journey is with going down some rabbit holes. And some of the stuff that I have traditionally been taught in, like, for want of a better word, mainstream, or what we can call now allopathic health, there's some big question marks on that. And I think one of my things that I'm very passionate about in the last few years is to show that information to people in a way that I guess lay people can understand it. So, and I think this area of terrain theory is just one of these remarkable areas that almost nobody has ever heard of, which is very relevant to what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, you're totally right. And so just to break it down for people like myself who have no idea what germ theory is or terrain theory is, the first time that it's coming into their awareness that there's a theory about germs. Just break it down for us. What exactly is germ theory and where did it come from?
Absolutely. So the interesting thing to note, and sometimes it's the blatantly obvious stuff that stands out, the whole thing, the whole domain, the whole paradigm about germs is actually called, the name for it is called germ theory. Okay, and I find that quite incredible because it's not called germ fact. Okay, so that implies rightly that it is theoretical. Okay, so the whole, I guess,
so basically what you're saying is that what I was told as a young boy, that be careful of germs out there in the dirt and germs on the tap and germs on this place that you got to be very careful of, is just a theory.
Absolutely, it's a theory, and this theory found its feet. The whole kind of start of the theory, and again, I haven't done notes for these chats, and I don't like to have them in the form of a lecture, so I may be a little bit off with some dates and some specifics. So again, feel free to correct me in the comments if you pick up on that, but you'll get a good idea of the general concept from this conversation. But if I'm correct about this, the whole idea about this lurking devil that can kill you kind of started off in Europe in about the 15th, 16th, 17th century, okay? And the powers that be, when ships were coming from other countries, realized that sometimes there were these kind of contagion events and people would get sick. And there was a kind of a double little hit to this. They realized that if they saw ships approaching, they could put these rules in place to keep the ships offshore for a period of weeks, just to make sure the invisible bugs died out. Now, what that meant from a strategic footing and a war footing was that by the time a ship is sitting offshore for a few weeks, the resources on board the ship would run out. So the chances of having kind of a serious invasion or a healthy load of people coming to shore were reduced. So it was a good way of containing things from a political point of view. And you had these diseases like scurvy and whatnot, which were implied that they could be infectious. So in around the early 1800s, a fella came along from France called Louis Pasteur, who everybody's probably heard about because we talk about pasteurized milk. And this is kind of what he's famous for, is killing the evil germs in milk by pasteurization. So he came up with this hypothesis that there were these little, he I guess, to his mind, proved the hypothesis that there were these little invisible little things that were flying around that could make us sick and kill us, and could be passed on from one person to the other. And this is basically what the foundations of all medicine are built upon.
Interesting. So, I mean, from my perspective, there is inherently a lot that is going on in between us in this moment right now. In the air, there's all these little dust mites, and there's like so much that we cannot see that is impacting our lives potentially, such as the Wi-Fi that's making this video possible. There's all these different wavelengths of frequencies, and why isn't it possible that there could be germs in that space as I'm speaking or talking to you that could be exchanged? And would it be possible that I could have toxic or negative or harmful germs that could potentially harm you or be toxic for you? Or is that separate, or is it of the same thing?
And this is why this conversation I'm really excited to do with you, because the way that you're even framing your questions is perfectly normal if you didn't know about terrain theory. And one of the things, again, that I find continually fascinating about going on the journey that I'm going on, and I have a lot of frustration with this also, is the fact that in 20 odd years of mainstream health, I only heard about terrain theory, maybe 5 years ago. And I superficially dug around in it around then, and then I started getting more interest in it probably about 3 years ago. And obviously with all the stuff that's happening in relation to pandemics and whatnot, I've taken a much deeper dive. And what I originally thought of was as possibly quite absurd, there is a truckload of evidence to say that it's actually not absurd, and it's a fairly valid theory. And my other frustration is that if you have this immensely possibly valuable theory floating around there, my question is why, when I was doing my training and all the way up and for 10, 20 years in the field I'm working in, I've never heard of this. And to me, there's a big question mark, there's something wrong.
So what you're telling me is that basically in your training, when you're going to nursing school and university and whatnot, you're taught to base everything on the germ theory.
Absolutely. But what if germ theory is wrong?
They don't teach you that, huh?
Absolutely not.
And so what's the alternative? What's terrain theory exactly?
I opened you up for that question, so I'm glad you got that, okay? But the opposing theory is a thing called terrain theory. And in around exactly the same time as Pasteur, with a few years overlap, there was a fellow called Antoine Beauchamp, okay? Actually, before him, there's another really important figure, a fellow called Claude Bernard, okay? And this guy used to do some very interesting stuff, and we still have his books and his diaries. And he used to travel around the world, and his idea was that this concept of germs was inaccurate. And what he used to do was he used to do these live demonstrations, and he used to go to these foreign countries and take cholera water. And cholera is the perfect example of germ theory. We have this idea that there are these little bugs in the water that cause cholera. We get infected by it, and then people get sick. And what Bernard noticed was that lots of people drinking this water did not get sick. And he wasn't too sure why. And he was one of the first people to have this idea that there was something else going on. So what he used to do was drink this cholera water, which was deadly, and himself and maybe 2 or 3 people would not get sick. And maybe 7 or 8 people during his demonstrations would drink the water, and the other people would get violently sick. Okay, so he was hypothesizing, why is this happening? Okay. And one of the things that he was coming up with was that maybe the terrain or your body's health was what we should be focusing on. And the water was just a medium for, if there was toxicity in your body, for that to be a trigger to get rid of the toxicity in your body. And this is called terrain theory. So then the next person who built upon Bernard's work was this guy called Beauchamp. And Beauchamp, I'm not sure if he could have coined the term terrain theory, but he's the one who really brought it to the fore. And the idea about terrain theory is that there's a difference between toxicity and between contagion. And toxicity obviously is a thing like heavy metal poisoning or certain diseases we can get from insects which cause our bodies to be poisoned. But the idea about contagion is we have these little bugs, and I can sneeze and I can pass it on to you, and then you get a cold. Terrain theory means that we can stimulate a response in other people if they're sick. So a good idea in relation to the common cold is a great kind of thing to think about when we talk about terrain theory. It would be that in the summer, everybody's thriving and we're healthy and we've got these great foods and we've got good sunlight and our immune system is working really well. Then we go into winter and we're kind of in survival mode, unless we're in modern society, obviously. And during that period, some people have these parts of their body that are not getting good blood flow and kind of are breaking down, or that are not working optimally. And then when the summer hits, we have seasonal flu, which if you look at terrain theory, it means that you're just breaking down the shitty parts of your body that were compromised in the winter, and you're eliminating them through your mucus or diarrhea or phlegm or colds and sneezing. And so the idea about how you can get the flu, if I already have it, is not related to me giving you that germ, but what it is related to is me shedding viral particles and stimulating this response in you, because you've got that same environment or terrain that needs to be cleaned up.
I hear you. So terrain theory, from what I'm hearing from you, in a short summary, is essentially the terrain or the environment of my body working through eliminating any toxicity in the
Yes, absolutely. Well,
body. Triggered by certain germs or bacteria. Is that right?
Correct. By particles which can kind of morph, and this gets us to the next kind of incredible segue, I guess, or pivotal part of germ theory. And one of the things that we look at in modern medicine when we're looking at germs and bacteria is we look at things under microscopes and under slides. And what we're doing is we're looking at dead stuff. So essentially we take things from the human body, we squash them down in between slides.
Say like my snot, for example.
Absolutely.
Or
lung tissue or anything.
Lung tissue.
And we squash these things down into slides, and then we put it under a microscope, we magnify them to these huge kind of degrees, and then we see what's going on. And one of the things with terrain theory is looking at...
So like you're looking at a dead particle or a dead cell that is not functioning, alive, moving.
Absolutely.
It's squished.
And then you can do slides over time, and you can see something else dead and something else dead, and you can hypothesize about that.
Okay.
But in around the time of where terrain theory, I guess, had more evidence to back it up, is this idea of pleomorphism. Okay, and this we can see. There's some incredible slides, mostly out of Germany, that show this. And the kind of microscopy that you use to look at this looks at live microscopy, and it's a very, very specific type of microscope that actually shows this. And there's some quite incredible and compelling videos of red blood cells, and you can see this evolution of the red blood cells that are floating around, and then they kind of almost look like they're developing tiny hairs growing out of them, and then these hairs break off, and then these hairs look essentially like viruses, and then they grow into bacteria, and they grow into eventually things like funguses. So this idea and the idea is that these little particles, depending on how much needs to be cleared up, start at a certain level, and the more stuff that's got to be cleared up, these little things mutate, and they start eating the bad stuff and then taking it from inside our body outside our body.
Right, to help cleanse the body.
Absolutely.
So one thing that comes up for me in this whole discussion is how miraculous the human body actually is in itself, detoxifying, self-cleansing, self-healing, and regenerating. It just has this natural ability to, through a process of vomiting, diarrhea, or sneezing, whatever it may be, that it's just like always constantly working for us, like for our health, for our vitality, for our well-being, even if that takes us to a low energetic space where we feel like we need to rest in bed and be so-called sick for a few days to cleanse and to heal, and then to come back stronger, more resilient, right?
Absolutely. And this is so essential to this whole topic about terrain theory, is the things we're describing are symptoms. And we have this idea that the symptom means something is broken and has to be fixed. How about if the symptom was the actual fixing? And by us treating the symptom, we are switching off the fixing.
Wow.
So I'll give you a great example. And people again, in 10, 15 years of health, I never had these concepts, which I'm going to tell you now. And I find this remarkable that I wasn't given the opportunity to explore this and then decide what was right and wrong. I kind of don't like to be treated like an idiot in health, especially when I think that I've gotten to a very high degree of health. And I look back and I kind of think now, wow, this information was partitioned. I didn't get it, and I'm kind of really irritated. So what about if you eat something bad and you have diarrhea and you get the runs? So you go to your doctor, and the doctor gives you something to stop your diarrhea. So diarrhea is acidic. You're eliminating acid from your body automatically, and vomiting is the same. Your stomach has an acidic pH. Eliminating these things automatically means that you're getting rid of acid. Your body immediately goes into an alkaline state. And as we know, alkaline states are powerful when it comes to healing. And what are we doing? We're switching off these things. You're vomiting, you go to the doctor and you get what's called an antiemetic, which means that you stop the capacity for your body to alkalize itself.
Wow.
It's so logical and straightforward. We have colds and flus, and we get the medication to stop our sniffles, and we have this mucus coming out that's packed with stuff our body is trying to get rid of. And what are we doing? We're switching it off.
Wow.
It's insanity.
Yeah, it is. I think back to my teenage years where I was drinking a lot and smashing down the beer bongs and all the canies, and I'd get to a point where I had drunk so much in one night that my body was always wanting to throw up and spew up. Now it finally makes sense as to why I would have that reaction, because it's trying to get rid of that acidic, toxified alcohol abuse and trying to get it out of my system when I'm trying to throw it all down there.
Not only that, so first of all, you're getting rid of a belly full of stuff that your body doesn't want in it, but then for a day afterwards, you're still possibly vomiting. And that's where the alkalizing effect, or getting rid of the extra acids comes into play. Absolutely.
We used to call it the Chunda Thunder.
Listen, I'm Irish, and so I've got my fair history of doing things that are not so pro-healthy. But I think that's a really good point you're making as well, Shay. Like we I hope I'm never really sitting here and I hope I'm never sitting here and kind of saying that we are doing all this stuff and we're holier than thou, and we've all got these kind of past lives and environments, and I'll still do stuff that's stupid. I'll still do stuff and get drunk, or I might do the so-called naughty stuff. But the idea, I think, is to be aware of these things and to try to strive towards better and optimal health.
Optimal health is something that we should all be working towards, but it seems like there's a contradiction here, because ideally as humans we want to be healthy and alive. And for example, my partner, she's been sick the last couple of days and she's been tired and fatigued, and she said to me, this just makes me appreciate and have more gratitude for just having health, because that means I can do all the things I want to do in my day. I can go to yoga, I can go to the market, I can go to the beach. And it's like, well, that's inherently what we are all striving for, but it seems it's so easy to take it for granted.
But here's the thing, what if what your partner is going through now is health in action? So we have this idea of something like that happening to your partner as being something that's negative. What if that was actually a positive thing of her body saying, we need to stop now and we just need to clear out some nasty stuff here, and then let me do this please for you, and then you're going to be getting back onto all that stuff you really like. What if we embraced these symptoms and left our bodies do what they wanted to do?
That's huge. It's like such a shift in perspective to have appreciation for the sickness or the illness or the chundering and actually appreciate that that's part of the body's natural process to eliminate waste and toxicity, and that is the health journey.
So here's an interesting question. When you're really miserable and sick, where would you rather be? Would you rather be sitting in your bed going, oh my God, I hate this and I'm really sick and I'm broken in some way? Or would you rather still have all your symptoms and go, wow, this is good. I'm actually healing now. From a psychological point of view, I know where I'd rather be. I'd rather be having that slightly positive coming in there, as opposed to having a serious case of man flu, which as guys we may be more prone to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super interesting, man. It's a great perspective on it. And so, just looking at the two, germ theory and terrain theory, is there a way that they can cross-pollinate? There's some, or are they completely different perspectives on the same thing?
If you were to follow the and I'm still processing as well, so I'm not an advocate for specifically terrain theory, but what I really want to make a strong point of is that it is an absolutely valid theory that we must be considering. And from where I'm sitting, so I'm actually sitting now or standing or whatever you want to say, is I'm actually edging much more towards terrain theory than germ theory. And if we look at these different diseases, the Black Death, the plagues, all these things that happened many, many years ago, we have to ask ourselves some logical questions. Why didn't everybody die? So apparently these things are ultra deadly, and everybody's connecting and spreading things in all these different ways, but for some reason humanity is still around. What is the go with that? So either these things are deadly or they're not. Can you have it halfway? What is stopping just us getting wiped out? Why weren't we wiped out millennia ago? Why are we still alive? And concepts around the terrain theory actually answer those questions for us.
So to break it down simply again for myself and people like me, terrain theory is essentially focusing on the eternal resilience with health, so that our body can do its natural process of eliminating toxicity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess we have these environments, or we have these terrains, and for some people they are living very, very well and very healthy, and these are the guys who just seem to never get sick, and that would imply that their terrain is in really good shape. Unfortunately, in modern living, we're getting attacks from every area. So as you said, from blue light, from Wi-Fi, from processed foods, from fear. It's a massive thing. Fear compromises our blood supply throughout our body. So if you have a compromised blood supply, there are mechanisms in your body that can be less than optimal. Okay, and then this is, so if you are ticking all these boxes, and ironically psychology has a huge amount to do with this, and the concept of wellness within yourself. So sometimes just your belief, and this relates back to stuff that I talk a lot about, which is the nocebo effect and the placebo effect, but the belief in your wellness can be enough to strengthen your body so that it doesn't need to eliminate all these things. But let's say you're under attack and you're having fights with your partner, or your job's shit, or you kind of fell off the wagon with drinking or whatnot, then your body will sometimes go, hang on, I need to stop everything and I need to eliminate stuff. And if you're going through that process, and I'm also in a similar environment where I'm eating the same things and the light's the same, then me having contact with you would mean that the particles that you're eliminating would stimulate that same response in me. So that is not some bug that's trying to affect me. There's a great analogy, and the analogy is flies at the rubbish tip. So aliens come down, they're driving past the rubbish tip, they go past the flies and they go, holy shit, and they go back to the planet they're on and say, well, we've got all these flies and they just cause all these mountains of rubbish. It's insane. Okay.
Yeah,
it's insane. Or another analogy is the firemen and the houses, and they're driving past every time they see a fire on a house, they see the firemen and they go, hey, those firemen, we should get down and just get rid of them. They're burning all these houses down. So just because we have these germs that are attached to these physical illnesses, are they actually causing it, or are they the byproduct?
Great question. And so I guess essentially germ theory suggests that they're causing it. Terrain theory suggests that they're the byproduct of the process of healing it.
Absolutely well put.
Interesting.
Absolutely well put.
Wow.
You look kind of a bit stunned with that.
Massively stunned. It goes against everything that I thought I knew.
Well, imagine me sitting in hospitals for 20 years, and this is the fundamentals of how we treat patients. It's absolutely the fundamentals. So and again, if you wanted to, it's also, I think, good to be aware of these things, because we have this idea of germs being the enemy, but then we come back to another thing which I'm very, very passionate about talking, which is your microbiome, for example, and this idea of environments, balanced environments of these little things which you might call germs or bacteria or whatnot, and they work themselves out. And we have these kind of logic bombs that we hear and we go, oh wow, I didn't think of that. But where is the place where you get the most deadliest bacteria and bugs in the world? Do you know what it is? Hospitals.
Wow.
MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, among lots of others. Okay, and one of the theories behind that, which I think is a valid theory, is that everything is sterilized. And if you take all the flora away from an environment, you have the opportunity for one thing to get in there without anything to control it. So the analogy again, it would be, it's always incredible for me, this concept of as above, so below. I'll keep on talking, yeah. But so this also relates to things like permaculture, which is something that you're very big on, and things like environmental things. So we have these situations where we have these massive farming industries that just have one crop, and that's not in balance. So as a result, because you don't have all these microbes in the soil that are doing the right thing, or a variation of plants that are giving things back to the soil and back to the earth, you can have just one thing come in and destroy these whole massive loads of crops. And then we create these ridiculous situations for ourselves, where then we have to spray all these absolutely horrendous poisonous chemicals on to control this environment that we've inadvertently created ourselves. And then we go into hospital situations where we have tons of antibiotics being administered, and then we have antibiotic-resistant superbugs.
Scary world.
Indeed.
Superbugs.
Indeed.
monoculture.
Yes. Yeah.
What is the alternative? What are the options for it? Where do we focus? How do we heal?
So again, you have these very intriguing branches of medicine that are now starting up. You have German new medicine, you have circadian medicine, you have these different types of healing modalities, and you have people like Wim Hof, who is putting his method out there. And ironically, when you're breathing, carbon dioxide is a form of an acid. In water, carbon dioxide is an acid. So by hyperventilating, you're actually changing the acidity environment in your body
to become more alkaline.
Well, initially, when you're holding your breath, you have a big pH imbalance. So your carbon dioxide goes up. So this stimulates a response to a high acidic environment, which is actually a really healing thing to do. And then you're hyperventilating and you're becoming alkalinic. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we have so many little pieces of the puzzle. If we joined these dots, we could essentially be very, very healthy, and maybe without the need for some of these medical interventions that we have. But then we have another problem where we are compromising the profits of some seriously big industries. And I'm not too sure if those huge industries would be happy with these things at work.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and for listening to this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this series, and if you'd like to listen to the full episode and get more conscious content online, tune into our online video platform at earthheroestv.com. Hope you have a great day, guys, and a huge love from me, and see you next time.